Holy Happy Hour Batman. I am Ben. I am an Episcopal priest and co-founder of the All Ports Open Network. And on this show, Holy Happy Hour Batman, I am joined by heroes of the gaming and geek world to talk about all kinds of stuff. Life, faith, spirituality, game design philosophy, maybe video games, whatever else comes up. Hey, I don't know if anyone's playing any video games. I guess we're going to find out. Tonight on Holy Happy Hour, I have another fabulous guest. I'm very excited. Game designer Adira Slattery is joining me to talk about a number of things, including Tension, a queer cat and mouse game for 2 to 3 players. I can't wait to talk about it. I feel like we probably will talk about gun fucks too, especially so I can say gun fucks a lot on the show. We're going to see. I should get like one of those little fuck counters in the corner to like see how many times we say it in one episode. Anyway, we're going to talk about the game. Oh yeah, that's, I went off notes there. We're going to talk about Tension. I want to talk about designing romance games. That's something that we just talked about that with my wife on the last episode of the show. We're going to talk about games for 2 to 3 players, queer game design, and whatever else. So yeah, stick around. It's going to be another great conversation. Really excited about it. Before we get into the show, a few things. Holy Happy Hour Batman is a production of allportsopen.com. Check out our website for our lineup of podcasts and streams, where we are talking all about stories and sharing and making and talking about great stories. With the shows like our horror audio drama Weeping Cedars. If you haven't listened to Weeping Cedars, all 3 seasons of that show are out. You can binge listen to that fabulous slow horror audio drama. You can listen to Delinquent Comics, which is my own Masks AP show. And hey, what more perfect time of year could there be to listen to a Masks actual play podcast than as we are about to enter into March tomorrow and the annual competition, March Masksness. Make sure you go to marchmasksness.com and find out about that. It's a bracket game like March Madness, but with Masks actual play characters. Maybe I'll talk about it again at the end of the show. We won't waste too much time here about that. Right after the show, there's 2 things I do want to plug for you, though. Stick around here on the stream, and I'm going to raid our show right into our Monday show of The Worst Days on the All Ports Open Network Twitch channel. The Worst Days is a horror RPG about being young. And let's see, Monday night, I think it's been a little bit. So yeah, Monday night is doing a horror campground game. So it's I think the 80s. Don't quote me on that decade because I can't remember what decade it is. But they're playing in a campground. They're camp counselors. And yeah, so that's the Monday night, The Worst Days. And we're going to raid right into it after this. But hey, if you want to watch some non-All Ports Open Network content tonight, you could instead go to Spellbound Mage on Twitch and watch the March Masksness pre-bracket stream where characters from Masks Actual Play podcast are going to show up in character and chat about the competition. Titan from Delinquent Comics is supposed to make a showing, and it's hosted by Mystic from the Otherware podcast. So yeah, so that's happening right after the stream. You can check that out. That's Spellbound Mage on Twitch if that's your kind of thing. So all right, I have other notes here in my plugs to plug, but I'm gonna wait. I'll wait. I was gonna talk about my game Broken, but it's not like it's out or anything. I just was gonna plug it because I also have a romance RPG that I'm hyping. So maybe it'll just come up in our conversation here tonight in a little bit. Before we get to the show, though, and before we bring our guest on, it is happy hour, and as you can see, we have a drink right there on the screen. So this cocktail that you see on the screen here is my interpretation of. This is inspired by Tension, the queer cat and mouse game. I called it the Queer Cat because it's a variation of a classic cocktail called the I think it's called the Tomcat or something like that. Something like that. It's a gin based cocktail, and so I wanted to make kind of a sexy, elegant, sort of classy cocktail to represent this cat and mouse sort of feel. So this is served up like a martini Speaking of cats, mine is literally batting me this entire time. It's very distracting. But this is like a martini style served up. It's gin and scotch, so it's a little smoky. It's got dry sherry and sweet vermouth in it. I put star anise in it. This is really good. I really like this one. I'm really excited about this one. Basically, just combine all this stuff. Lots of bitters. I mean, like tons of bitters in the shaker for this. Shake it up, chill it, pour it into a chilled martini glass, garnish it with an orange slice or a dehydrated orange slice or the trepidation of a risky romance. Like whatever it is that you want to pair it with, that you would like to garnish it with. So that's our cocktail for the night. In about like right now, yeah. If you go to twitter.com right now to That Gamer Priest on Twitter, you will see the recipe card for this drink, and I will share it again after the show. So, all right, that's all of our pre-show stuff out of the way. Let's go ahead and bring our guest on the show, and hopefully all the sound will be good. You'll be able to hear her and me. So Adira, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Welcome to Holy Happy Hour.
Nice.
We have been off for a few weeks, so it's nice to be back here doing the show. I'm glad you're our comeback guest. I'm excited about that. I'm excited about having you on.
Oh yeah.
Thanks for making the time and for coming on to talk about the game, about tension.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember whether you were plugging the game somewhere or if I just stumbled on it and I was like, I need to talk to Adira about this game. Because it's totally our pot of, I don't remember. It's just totally such a pot of love game, which for if listeners don't know is hey, Sublime March in the chat, welcome. And Jeff Stormer. Hey Jeff Stormer, how are you? Sorry, just shouting out to people in the chat. Yeah, it's such a pot of love game. I needed to have you on to talk about it. By the way, I just want to let you know, since we were having our pre-show conversation, that literally while I was doing my intro spiel just now, I have popping up in the right-hand corner of my computer screen friends of mine playing Elden Ring. Like, it's just popping up in the corner, like, so-and-so is playing Elden Ring, so-and-so is playing Elden Ring, and it's just going off. It's just popping off down there in the corner while we're chatting. Not that either of us knows anything about that.
Yeah, not at all. I haven't been playing shit tons of Elden Ring in the slightest.
Am I allowed to call you out and ask you how many hours into the game you are, or is that
sure?
Is that too?
No, that's fine. I am 40 hours into Elden Ring.
Nice. That's great. And you've gotten 5 minutes into the game. No, I'm just kidding. That's
yeah, sure. Yeah,
just a difficulty joke. That's all.
No. I find the difficulty of the game perfectly fine. I mean, it's about pattern recognition, and it's about knowing and knowing what you can face. Like, I jump over people's heads with my horse constantly because it's just I don't need to fight this guy. I'm just gonna leave.
Yeah. That's what you gotta do.
Yeah.
Do you feel like now I'm just thinking about this. Do you feel like that's a trait? Do you know of tabletop RPGs that replicate that feel? And do you feel like that's something that should be more prevalent in? I guess it's kind of an OSR type of feel, but like, do you think thing should be more? Do you think it should be like more prevalent in TTRPGs?
Yeah, I think it should be. There's a lot of power in saying no, and like recognizing that you can say no to like engage with different aspects of a game, especially.
Yeah.
And like people generally only think about that in the context of like a safety mechanic, right?
Yeah.
They only think about like saying no in that specific sort of circumstance, but like, you can always say no to anything. I mean, you're playing make believe. It's okay.
Yeah, that's why it's always weird to me when there's pushback about safety mechanics, because it's always like, to me, it's just always like, you don't want the ability to say no. Like, you're playing a make believe game. Like, you don't want the ability. Yeah. Like, isn't it baked in that we can just say no to some of this stuff? Like, I don't know. I don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I've played a lot of millions and bajillions of tabletop games, and they're fun when you engage with them at the level that you want to engage with. And like all games and all play is like that to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, so why don't you tell people about Tension, and we can talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that. I'm excited to dig into it.
Yeah. So Tension is a queer cat and mouse game, as you were saying before. It's inspired by things in that sort of genre, like the Hannibal TV show and the Killing Eve TV show, which the final season of Killing Eve is coming out
That's right.
soon. Yeah. And I wrote it in like a marathon session. I watched an episode of Killing Eve actually, and I was like, all right, I got to write a game. And I sat out and just vomited this game out.
Yeah.
And I really liked it. It's to use a phrase from Bubblegum Sam, it's post Bob. So it takes a lot of the conventions of belonging outside belonging. If you're familiar with that, those are games like Dream Askew, Dream Apart, any of that sort of like no dice, no master sort of zone. And so it takes that and takes a lot of those sorts of things and moves sort of in a different way. It's a fun time. Instead of tokens like in a lot of other games, you use tarot cards, and you make a little line of tarot cards and you do scenes about them, and and you make 22 people.
22.
Yeah. You make one character for every single major arcana.
Wow.
And you play all of them.
Wow. That's wild.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Character creation is really neat. And you make this like whole big web of people, and this whole you make all of these cool, interesting people that you want to know so much about, and then you just start killing them. Because it's also, this game is about murder.
Right.
And the inherent homoeroticism of murder.
So MC Wallace in the chat says tarot cards is an awesome idea and just subscribed. So thank you for subscribing. That does happen to be my wife, so I feel like it's a little bit of nepotism or something going on there, but that's not the right word, but you know what I mean. Tarot cards are a great idea. I was going to ask, one of the things I wanted to ask you was, oh, you must have resubscribed. Sorry, I shouldn't be talking to my wife in the chat. I was going to ask you about the tarot card. Now we're just having husband-wife banter in the chat now.
Yeah, sure.
I was going to ask you, are the tarot cards like interpretive? Is it like interpreting? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's that. There also is a little like guide in the game for if you need like sort of discrete story prompts for different stuff. But yeah, playing the tarot cards does different sorts of moves. You can inject a scene or an action with one of the sort of emotions of the cards. And if you play one of the major arcana that introduces that NPC, they're called orbits because they're orbiting characters in and around in the area, and introduces one of the orbits into the scene. It's a fun time.
It sounds awesome. I really like the idea of using it as world building because you're creating 22 characters.
Mm-hmm.
How many of them typically would die by the end of a game?
I have seen games of Tension where one person dies, and one person has to die. One person dies at the start of the game.
All right. Okay.
I've seen games of Tension where one person dies, and I've seen games of Tension where like 75% of those people are dead.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Sorry, this is part of it self-serving because I'm thinking about our next season of Pot of Love, and I'm like, this is how we should start the next season of Pot of Love. We should like start by playing this game and let that be like the feel of the season. Do you know what I mean?
Sure,
like it could be the tense romance season of the show. It could be starting with this game and then also have some like Pasión de los Pasiones or something, so the tension just continues and it's just like all kinds of drama and Yeah. That's really super tempting. But I love the idea of it as like I love that much world building in a 2 to 3 player like game like this. Like to me, it's a romance game, but maybe it's not primarily a romance. I don't know if it's a fair.
No, it is.
Okay.
It is.
You would say it's primarily a romance game.
I would say not necessarily even romance. I would say it's primarily an intimacy game.
Okay. Can you tell us about the distinction for that?
To me, the distinction. So in Tension, the characters aren't necessarily being romantic, but they are being intimate.
Okay.
Like you don't need to be romantic to like have a impassioned conversation with someone after you've just watched them murder someone. And as they like stand closer and closer to you and your lips almost touch, that's not necessarily romantic.
Well, yes. No, I shouldn't make it. You're right. I like that distinction. I think that's a really important distinction.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Because I think I use romance as like a catch-all term for any RPG game that's
yeah. I mean, it's not a romance game.
Right. Right.
Like the majority of the games of Tension that I play involve romance.
Yes, sure. But it doesn't necessarily have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it always would include intimacy.
Yes. Yeah, because the game is about the two central characters, the killer and the investigator. When you play the 2-player version, the two of you are those like specific avatars, and then the orbiting characters. With the 3-player version, the two of you are those two people, and the third person plays 20 people.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fun. That playbook's called the Ensemble. It's really fun to do, to like flex your funny voice muscle and things like that. Because like generally the only times you get to do that sort of stuff where you're playing a whole bunch of people is if you're like GMing or running a game, right?
Yeah.
And the Ensemble isn't like the GM, right? Everyone is the GM in this game.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's fun to do that.
Someone's knocking on my front door. This is the Holy Happy Hour Batman first. I have whoever it is going to have to get ignored for the Twitch stream. That's just never happened during this show where someone is knocking on the door. Yeah, that sounds really awesome. I like the idea that I just played Anyone Can Wear the Mask last night. So that's where my mind went. And
sure.
we did it. We recorded for actual play. So I played the city.
Okay.
For that. So, in some ways that was the ensemble character, right? The ensemble playbook. Like I was playing, and it was a little bit challenging. I don't know that personally as a player, that's my vibe. I think that really even though I GM all the time, right? Like someone is still knocking at the door. I GM all the time, but like, and maybe it's I don't know what it is about that, but I feel like I'm not the most ensemble person. Whereas I do think that I probably fit much better in like one of the two, like really, I'm going to have to go see who's knocking on the door. They won't go away. I'm going to put up a waiting screen for everybody, and I'm going to make this as fast as feasibly possible. So everybody put your questions in the chat, and we'll address questions in like 2 seconds.
I should look at the chat. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. And we will be, I think I have a be right back. I do. We'll be right back in like 2 seconds. I promise. Don't go anywhere, folks. And we're back. I apologize that. I hope folks stuck around. This is what's terrifying about what just happened, folks. No one was there. I went to the door, and this person, whoever, like the rasping was like melodic too. It was like a, it was like, like a shaving a haircut sort of rasping, right? And it happened multiple times. And it was kind of a gentle rapping, but it was certainly a knock, and it was several times. I opened that door. There's nobody there. Mm-hmm. So I feel like maybe there's a ghost trying to to interrupt our show with questions about. So I'm looking. Oh, you're unionizing and taking over the show.
Yeah, I was trying to unionize chat.
You can.
You were barely gone, so
wasn't enough time for an uprising. Anyway, this is what happens when we take off a few weeks. I feel like I come back and things are just goofy. We got goofy stuff happening. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to you and to all of our audience.
My glasses.
What's that?
Your wife liked my glasses.
I know. I saw that that we need to upgrade my glasses game. It's true.
I got them from Zillow.
Really?
Not Zillow. Zenny.
Oh, I was confused because I think Zillow's a real estate website. It'd be real wild if you could I
could order. Buy eyeglasses on Zillow.
Not yet. We'll just wait. Oh, my wife's are from Zenny too. So this is what I'm saying. This is a weird week for Holy Happy Hour. Sometimes we talk deeply about religion and philosophy, and sometimes we talk about buying glasses on the internet with my wife. So, that's a good question in the chat though. Do you live inside your glasses, your eyeglasses?
I mean, I wear them all of the time, so yes.
Hence why you can buy them on Zillow. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So let me ask you another question about the game. We'll get steer us back by segue back into the game. When you call it a queer cat and mouse game, I'm curious about using that adjective. So, like for you, what makes it queer? Like,
everything. Yeah, everything is what makes it queer.
Yeah. Can we unpack that more? Because I'm just excited to unpack that idea.
Yeah, sure. Okay. When I think about the sort of styles of different kinds of eroticism, and I think about different sorts of like lenses and gazes that you can view like relationships and people through, I was trying to capture that specific queer gaze that I feel. And I want people to use this to tell queer stories.
Okay.
Like there are like sort of straight stories that you could tell using tension, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm going to be releasing a guide soon about hacking the game to be able to take the sort of central system in it to use it, play a bunch of different sorts of games. And one of the things that I've talked about before on Twitter when I talk about hacking tension is Hades and Persephone.
Yeah.
So Hades and Persephone is another sort of story that can model to tension about two people. There are all these orbits; those would be the other gods. But like Hades and Persephone is a very straight story.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It's about that style of and some of the pitfalls of that relationship and how you can communicate in that sort of style. Like that there are a lot of people who've done some really cool stuff with Hades and Persephone in like how that relationship is good, and there are people who have talked about abusive aspects to it and things like that. So yeah, when I think about like the sort of what draws me in is like queer culture and intimacy comes from places of like historical transgression, right? Mm-hmm. Like broad culture at large not accepting, and so like that like transgressive aspect really shapes a lot of those sorts of things. So yeah, there was another thing I saw that was like very directly sort of murderer investigator, and they were in a sort of romancy sort of thing, that was straight people, where it was a like a female cop and a like male killer. Don't remember what. There's something I saw, and it's when you think about that, it's like, all right, so you have two people who society thinks should be able to have a intimate relationship with, and so like the idea of like, oh well, they have this specific connection and now it's turning into love, is like well, I don't know, it's more like societally, I don't want to say understandable, but yeah, like when it comes down to it, when I think about like queering stuff, it just makes it better.
Well, I was thinking what well, I was thinking while you were describing it that like I was thinking about star-crossed in relationship to
Sure, yeah,
these different concepts,
yeah.
and I was thinking about how in star-crossed, right, like I mean, regardless of the gender or sexuality of the characters, it's always there's always some sort of tension around that, some sort of taboo-ness almost. If it's not exactly taboo though, right? Like I don't know if that taboo is exactly the right word. Go ahead. Sorry.
There's a fun thing about Starcrossed,
Yeah.
actually.
Mm.
Just a quick aside.
Yeah, of course.
The in development name for Starcrossed was Tension.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, the reason they didn't end up using that name is because there is a box game called Tension that's like a dexterity game, I think, in the UK.
I see.
And so it's like a board game in the UK.
Okay.
Sort of like Monopoly style, like old board game.
Okay.
And since they wanted to package it with the tower, they weren't able to use the name.
Wow.
So when I was working on Tension, I talked to Alex Roberts sort of about that, to be like, hey, am I going to be okay with using this name? and I was given a thumbs up.
Okay, yeah, that's I almost can't imagine. It's hard for me to think about Starcrossed under a different name, but that's just
yeah.
But there's something about like, so I'm thinking about how there's something about the kind of tension in that game that is similar to, so like, yeah, it's really hard to parse, isn't it? Like,
yeah, well, I mean, Starcrossed is about like this sort of like lead follow sort of dynamic,
true, right?
And Tension is more looking at temptation, and like,
yeah,
like,
that is an interesting difference, right? The difference between, because you might be tempted in Starcrossed, but that's not the primary dynamic. No. It's the lead follow. That's a really good point. And the lead follow is different because, especially with the lead, even though the lead has concerns as to why they don't want to give in to their love, the lead is kind of initiating crossing those lines. And so I guess for the follow character,
and in Tension, the lead is a killer. So there's definitely a lot of line crossing, right?
Right.
And at the same time, the killer doesn't have to be the lead, right? So I've seen games of Tension where like the killer's sort of bopping about their day, and like they have this attraction to the investigator, right? But they're not pushing it, right? It's the investigator who's pushing it and pushing it along, things like that. So that's sort of another thing, because like you can in Tension, you can really play up the aspect of like, I'm tempting you to do stuff, and you can also really play up the thing of like, I'm very tempted by this, even though you're not trying to make it happen.
I do have a quick update about the door situation, which is it turns out that it was my neighbor texting us because my neighbor wants brown sugar, which is the funniest reason ever to me that they're interrupting the show. So I texted him back and like, I'm so sorry. I'm in the middle of a stream show right now and I cannot get up from my computer to give you brown sugar, but I'm a bad neighbor. What can I say?
Sugar to your neighbor.
I know, right? Like I'm the worst. I'm officially, canonically on the internet right now, the worst neighbor because I did not know. Because I would not. Another person is playing Elden Ring. I feel like I'm in this like weird, like this is a weird space for the show this week. Yeah, I had a thought about the game, and I know I've sidetracked myself, but
it's okay.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about. To me, the idea of like I have always kind of thought of Starcrossed as almost being inherently a queer game, even if you are really playing because of that societal line crossing aspect to it. That I feel like there is something just natively queer about the game. I don't know. And maybe that's just like from a queer perspective, it feels like that. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't know. Maybe it could be. I could be looking at it through queer colored glasses. I don't know. But it feels like that to me, as opposed to like, for example, like I wrote, this is a way to segue into me pitching the fact that I'm, in the middle of playtesting my own 2-player romance game, but like my game Broken is a breakup game, and there's absolutely nothing like natively queer about that game. Like I just playtested it with like a super straight, very typical 80s rom-com couple, and like it's just like it doesn't have any of that kind of you could tell queer breakup stories in it, sure, but they don't. But it doesn't have like, from a game design perspective, I guess it doesn't have like a queer design principle sort of feel to it. You think I'm on track with that? Does that
right? I'm somebody who believes that you can inject a lot of emotion and intentionality into your design based off of like the choices that you make as a writer and things like that, and like the mechanics you choose to include, the mechanics you choose to not include, to leave up to the players to determine for themselves. But also a lot of it comes from like writing what like, have you been in a lot of queer relationships?
Have I been in a lot of queer relationships? I guess it depends on your definition of a lot. So we'll say some. We'll say some.
Yeah. So
I haven't been in a lot of relationships, period. So the answer, I guess, theoretically is no. But compared to the number of relationships total I've been in, the answer is leaning towards yes. Sorry. Anyway, I made that answer convoluted.
Yeah. So like, if you wanted to queer up that game, think about how those sorts of relationships acted and things like that, right?
Yeah. Well, this is the most we've talked about a specific game most of the time. Which I'm loving. I'm loving the fact that we're like digging deep into a game. But I do also want to get into your own backstory, which is a lot of times what we do on the show. So if you're cool with that, like this is not a smooth transition. I'm off my game from being off the show for several weeks, but I am curious. I just want to, for people who might not know, like, what's your TTRPG origin story? Your backstory, your own personal character backstory.
Yeah. So when I was 7, I watched an episode of Batman the Animated Series, where Batman gets trapped in a labyrinth with a Minotaur, I think by the Riddler.
I remember that episode. Yeah, absolutely.
It wasn't. I don't even know if the show was still airing when I was 7. It might have been a rerun, but because I think it was only early 90s and that was late 90s. But I watched that episode of that show, and I wrote a game, and the game involved drawing a maze and putting letters in the maze, and you would go through the maze and you'd hit the letter and it'd be like, oh, it's D, well, it's a dragon. And then you'd narrate and talk through with the other person who was going through the maze. Like, did they fight the dragon? Did they beat the dragon? Whatever. And me and my friend Holden would play this game on the back of worksheets in Hebrew school at our temple.
So you were a
fun,
7-year-old Jewish game designer, is what you're telling me. I love
yes,
it. Just
yeah.
like make sure that's
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
And I showed the game to my dad, and my dad's like, "Oh, this is like this game I played in the '80s," and he threw the Red Book D&D games at me.
That's great.
The 1983 Basic Edition, and
some good parenting right there.
We played through that, me and Holden, and my older brother and various friends and things. D&D 3.0 came out like just a couple years later, so my brother ran a 3.0 game with me and my dad playing, and then when I got to middle school, I started DMing for friends, and then in high school I stopped really liking D&D and started playing other games. The Firefly role-playing game from Weiss Publishing, GURPS, Fate. And then in college I got into LARPing, and yeah.
Well, how did you get into LARPing?
Okay. So I was one of those insufferable people who thought that I was better than LARP.
I used to be one of those insufferable people too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I was like, oh well, I don't LARP. I don't LARP.
That's so funny in hindsight. Sorry.
Yeah.
This is me laughing at myself. It's hilarious in hindsight to think about having that attitude now. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in college, I showed up to the gaming group's like first sort of opening meeting. That was like we're all new freshmen and things like that. And somebody talked about running a LARP using the Amber Throne War, set in the Nine Princes of Amber series by Roger Zelazny, which I had read. And they seemed neat. The only other person that I knew there was going to go talk to them about this. So I went over there, learned how to play this game, went and did this LARP. There was a marathon weekend long LARP
nice.
Over Labor Day weekend. And then then I still refused to join the Vampire LARP that was part of that gaming group until Halloween, when a friend of mine ran a one-shot that afternoon, and everybody in it was in the Vampire LARP. And they were all about to head to the Vampire LARP afterwards, and they were like, you have to come with us. You would love this. And I was like, I don't know, maybe whatever. I'll just go and watch. So I watched, and then halfway through, a character got turned into a vampire, so I just jumped in and started playing that person. And then I Vampire LARPed for 8 years. I met my spouse through Vampire LARP. I met my other partner through other LARPs. Like, yeah, I'm big into LARP. The first published game I ever made was a LARP.
What is that?
That is probably Fools Rush In. Yeah, it's been run at conventions mostly. I don't actually know how to get a copy, or how to tell anyone to get a copy. I know it's been run at Intercon a number of times. But yeah, I wrote that as part at like a LARP writing hackathon.
Really?
Yeah. And that was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm.
So I guess that kind of leads right into the question I usually ask people is like, how did you know, like, how did you start designing and like, and how did you know you wanted to start writing games? I mean, in some ways, your story started with that, but
Yeah,
circled
yeah.
back to it.
There's no way that I could be not making games. It's impossible for me to stop. I'm making games constantly in my head.
Yeah.
I wake up and I write games. I go to sleep, and as I'm laying down trying to calm down for bed, I write games. Um, I'm in the shower and I write games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm driving and I'm writing a game in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking to people and I'm writing games. Yeah. I will never stop. Yeah, my spouse has just chimed in and said it's true. In the chat.
Yeah, that's interesting. And is there a point where that like really like, hold on, what's the way to say this? That's a lot of that's like a lot of background game writing that's happening.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that was always sort of the case for you, or if it like accelerated the more you were designing. So like, is it a situation where like the more games you make, the more you're doing it in your head all the time, or is that just like your static state always?
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah. This is just how my brain works. It's been this way since I was a small child.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So was there a moment when you realized like you could do it like do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So the first time I tried to make games to get money from them, I was very deeply dissatisfied with my life, and I knew that I enjoyed playing and making games. And I entered into a pretty terrible time that I refer to as the year of depression. I have clinical depression, but that was a pretty bad time for it. And I said that I was working full time to do game stuff. I'd saved up some money, so I was living off of that, and I wasn't working. And that kept going, and I kept not doing it. And then I transitioned, which is something that I have wanted to do for a long time. And that is what then gave me the confidence to put games on the internet.
Yeah.
Like the first game that I put on itch is a game that I wrote during that year of depression.
Wow.
It's a game called Antological Theory. It's a game about arguing ant philosophers. You make a weird ant philosopher. You're an ant. You have opinions about the hive and workers and food and stuff. And you debate philosophical questions. And it's a fun little comedy exercise improv game. And I threw that up on itch because somebody that I met at a LARP told me about itch. And then that person ran a game jam on itch called the Sad Mech Jam. And I did that, and I really loved the restriction of game jams where there was a specific sort of theme, because I need some constraints.
I love that about, I haven't designed for a jam yet because I've been kind of like hesitant to, and I've been thinking about doing it very like right now. But I do love that conceptually, the idea of like being constrained to design something. I think conceptually, I really like that. I just haven't done it yet.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's the phrase "restrictions breed creativity."
Right, exactly.
And so, having a prompt to go off of, I can make a game in about anything. So having some direction is good.
Well, you don't happen to know off the top of your head how many games you have on itch, do you? Because it's a lot. So it's not like I could just easily
20?
count it, but 20. Okay. It looks, I mean, it just looks like a lot visually.
1, 2,
so maybe
3,
it's only
4,
20.
5, 6.
Oh, I
7,
found
8.
Antological Theory. There it is. I was looking for it.
16, 17, 18.
I love the
19,
idea of a philosophy game, by the way. It just seems so wonderful.
24, 25, 26, 27. 27, discounting some games that were some things that aren't necessarily gamey. I stopped counting after a little bit. So about 27.
Yeah, so it's a lot. That's why I asked.
Yeah.
And I did link it there for folks in the chat. If they're watching this, it wouldn't be in the YouTube chat. So if you're watching this on YouTube, it's Adira.
It's my first name.itch.io.
Yeah, so
yeah,
real easy.
Adira.itch.io.
Really easy to find.
The best part about being trans is I have fabulous SEO. No one else has my fucking name.
Yeah.
No, very few people have a Hebrew first name and an Irish last name.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I guess I thought about it that way. Well, can we dig into that? Is it okay if we dig into that year and transitioning a little more and stuff like that? Is that okay?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we can talk about transitioning. Yeah.
You said that you knew for a while you wanted to do it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I identified as trans in high school.
Okay.
I was out socially to friends. I was socially transitioned in high school. I would go over to other people's houses and like dress up as me and things like that. Jewish summer camp was the first sort of like outlet that I got, and how I built a queer friend group that like supported me and stuff like that. When I was 14, I was talking to a friend of mine from Jew camp, is what we called it, on AIM.
Yeah, on AIM. There you go. That's right. I'm an AIM generation person, so I get it.
Yeah. So we were chatting on AIM, and I was talking to her about these thoughts and feelings that I was having and stuff like that. And she was like, "Oh, this sounds like this thing I saw in this webcomic."
Wow.
Yeah, and she sent me a webcomic about a trans woman.
Okay.
A trans woman in high school. And I was like, "Oh my God," and it like really clicked. So that's when I first started identifying as trans. And I tried to come out to my parents multiple times, and sort of chickened out. And then when I was 18 and about to go to college, I decided that that's when I was going to do it. So I got my parents alone and came out to them, and it went terribly. It went so awful. And it pushed me back into the closet, and I socially detransitioned.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
I used to say things like, "I used to be trans." I would have been a poster child for TERFs.
Wow.
Because they love people who detransition.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very depressed in college. I'd grown out my hair. I cut all that off. I threw out all of my girl clothes. Then like a couple years after college is when I started being a bit more open about gender stuff again, and talking to like the people about it, mostly partners, my now spouse. The two of us bonded over the totally cis emotions of wanting to be different genders. We're both trans. So after we got married is when I then started transitioning. When I came out to my parents, the sort of for the last time, I pulled Ozymandias from Watchmen, and I'd already started HRT beforehand. And it was like
I'm already doing it. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And my dad said a thing which killed me at the time. Because when I came out to parents when I was 18 the first time. Their sort of refrain was basically try being a boy, like just try it. You haven't been an adult yet, try being a boy, see how you like it. And my dad, who ended up becoming so fabulously supportive of my transition.
Wow.
He passed away last year. And he was so awesome. But he said a thing that at the time cut me to my core, which he went, well, you did what we asked. You tried.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it sucked. But like, you know, I processed all that with my therapist and did some stuff so that I was able to my parents put in the work to repair having a relationship with me. That ended up really good.
Did you have to? Sorry, if any of this at any point is too far down this road, make sure you say so.
I will.
Okay.
I will tell you. Don't worry.
I just want to make sure that it's as clear as possible. That since we're doing this for the show,
yeah.
But with your parents, did you have to like kind of push them to that place to have to rebuild that relationship? Like, was that because you had to set those boundaries and then you had to say like, this is what?
I was completely willing and totally able to completely cut off the people that they were. They grew into much better people. A lot of times people will think that older generations can't learn, and that's a fucking lie. They can learn, and they can apologize. I have received apologies.
And is any of that initial transphobia reaction related to like the Judaism aspect of it?
No.
And I asked that as someone who has grown up in communities that were Christian and transphobic, so it's certainly not so it's not related to that at all.
No. Yeah. It's a lot of it for my mother was fear. One of the things that helped with my mom was saying that Nazis already wanted to kill me for being a Jew, so this didn't really change much, which helped a lot.
It's such a loaded thing to say.
It's true.
Right.
So, Judaism is how I first got the community like around me that was supportive and at that. So it had nothing to do with that. No, it was all just normal America shit.
Right.
Yeah.
And because I was sort of in the back of my mind wondering like what it's like to come out as trans like as a Jewish person. And like maybe, and that probably depends on it
depends on the kind of Jew
Judaism.
You are.
Yeah, right.
I'm a tattooed transgender punk, and I'm currently pursuing rabbinical school.
Really? See, I didn't even know that about you when I had you come on the show.
That's because I haven't talked about it on Twitter.
There we go. You have hit the nail on the head as to how I find out a shocking amount of stuff in my life, far more things than I am proud of, but also 95% of the way I interact with Ttrpg community. Because well, that's not true anymore. I guess there's Discord as well.
Different people within Judaism have differing opinions on trans. Of course, there are a number of tremendously transphobic communities within Judaism, and tremendously conservative communities, especially within like white Ashkenazic Orthodox communities. and there also are fabulous communities that aren't like that.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I'm in Philadelphia, so like there's a Reconstructionist
yeah,
like rabbinical school here, and so that during seminary that was sort of a Judaism that I got to know, which is very different than other kinds.
Reconstructionists are nice. I like them. Yeah.
Yeah, my experience is that they were great.
Yeah.
They were great.
Yeah.
So
of the major movements in like Jewry, they are the one that I like the most. Yeah.
So tell me about pursuing rabbinical school.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be a rabbi. No one can stop me. Yeah, yeah.
I love that approach. Okay.
Yeah. God's a punk and needs to get put in his place. Yeah. So I mean, it's something that I'd want to do for a long time. And my dad dying was sort of the impetus for it. I'd always known about a number of the various sorts of kinds of like rabbis and how they practice things like that. And we ended up having a very fabulous experience with what is jokingly in the community referred to as a rent-a-rabbi. The rabbi for my family was in California at the time, since she had just had a grandchild.
Okay.
And it being COVID, she couldn't just sort of come fly back at the drop of a hat. But she recommended somebody to come and do this with us. And it was a very good experience. And I thought about my own community and how I wanted to be able to do that sort of stuff for them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I know how it works for like, a lot of seminarians for us, for like Christians, right? Which is that most of us have to have some sort of body that authorizes, someone to go to seminary. I have no idea how it works for rabbinical school.
Yeah. So rabbinical schools are generally associated with some sort of group or movement. You get ordained. You register with the state for all that nonsense.
Sure.
Just like in Christianity, there are non-denominational groups that aren't part of any of the major movements.
Now that I think is news to me. I don't think I knew that there was sort of non-denominational Jewish groups. That's fascinating to me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's specifically a rabbinical school here just outside Chicago, which is the school that I intend to be going to. I was talking to a friend of mine who is a rabbi who went to that school about that. So yeah. That's
amazing. That sounds so wonderful.
Yeah.
So do like I'm just curious if a like say like you described it as non-denominational version of like a rabbinical school, does that tend to be more progressive in Judaism than like because like in Christianity, like non-denominational churches tend to be more conservative, whereas I have the sense that that's not it doesn't translate the same way in Judaism.
No. Yeah. No. Yeah. Denominational in Judaism is more conservative.
That's right.
Yeah, because like I've got tattoos. I am polyamorous.
Right.
Like I'm trans.
Right.
I'm a woman. Like.
Right.
Yeah. there are only a handful of rabbinical schools in the country that would accept me. One of which is that Reconstructionist school outside of Philadelphia. I talked to them last year.
Okay.
But I didn't want to move, so I stopped talking to them.
Philly's great. Not that I'm advocating you move to Philly. I guess I would. But
if I didn't live in Chicago, I'd probably live in Philly. It's a nice city.
It is a good city.
I love Chicago.
And that school is in a great part of Philly it's basically down the street from the first seminary I went to. And I mean, it's a great neighborhood. It's a great area of the city. You'd probably love it. But hey, like you said, you live in Chicago and you're not going to move.
Yeah. And we have no shortage of Jews here.
Sure.
I had breakfast at the Kosher Dunkin' today.
Oh, okay. Really? That's amazing.
Yeah. There's a Holocaust museum here. Like there's a lot of Jews. The chain of grocery stores here is called Jewel Osco. And there's a grocery store that is just on the border of the city with one of the suburbs that my family calls the Jewel because it has a massive, it's got multiple kosher aisles, a kosher frozen food section. It's got a kosher butcher. It's got fucking everything. Wow. That's where the Orthodox shop. Yeah.
Nice. So one of the things I did want to ask you, so I've used this as a transition point, was because you designed something for a Jewish TTRPG anthology, but I didn't. So what did you design for that? I couldn't.
Yeah, I made a game about the Wise Men of Helm. So the Wise Men of Helm is based on the real town in Poland. But is fictionalized in Yiddish story humor as a town of fools. It's called the Wise Men of Helm, and it's a series of instructions to encourage and teach you how to tell Yiddish story jokes in that style.
Interesting.
To tell silly stories about the Wise Men of Helm. Yes, that's what I wrote for Doikade.
Oh, that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds really neat. That makes me want to check that out. I feel like that's something that, it's so niche, right? But it's also showing a cultural thing that unless you knew to find it, you may never encounter or know about.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's real. And it's so specific. Cool. Yeah, I was curious what you designed that was specifically, because I don't know why this is, Adira. I don't know what this is about this, but I have had so many more Jewish game designers on this show than any other particular group of people, and I don't know. I mean, I haven't done the math on that, but it's
sure.
But it certainly seems like it. Which is amazing. What's that? Yeah. Well, I it's interesting because, and I have had this conversation with people. I'm trying to think who I was just talking to about this. But there are a lot of Jewish game designers that are I'm a Jewish game designer. There are far less that I know of anyway. People who are I'm a Christian game designer. Not that those people aren't in some way Christian. I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
Or whatever, or at least culturally Christian, if not actively Christian like me. But
well,
there's some.
Christianity is, I mean, it's the dominant culture.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
you don't need to be a Christian game designer because most games are Christian. D&D is an incredibly Christian game.
Right. Right.
It's got fucking paladins. It's got Christocentric ideas of good and evil and monstrousness and things like that. So,
or at least
yeah.
like culturally Christian or like societally sort of Christian, right? Like because my where my mind goes about this every time this comes up on the show or in general in my own thinking
Mhm.
is like, yeah, I hear all that 100% sure, and I'm 100% sure that's exactly why you don't, like you said, you don't have to be a Christian game designer because like it's the cultural
Yeah.
dominant religion.
Mhm.
Like you don't have to be a Christian game designer.
Mhm.
Um, but unfortunately, I think this is like my own sort of worldview just coming through. Like I think that societal Christianity, cultural Christianity, isn't really good Christianity. I don't think it's really authentically Christian. I think it's
Yeah.
I think it's like um a co-opted version of Christian. It sort of takes what what I think about. Again, is my own worldview here, my
Mhm.
own theology here. But like, what it to me, it's like has almost nothing to do with the actual Jesus and the actual teachings of Jesus,
Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
so what I wonder about all the time is like what games look like if that were the lens that someone were to design them in, because like
Ah.
did you see that Bible Kickstarter RPG thing that was,
Yeah.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
right. So like that is like why I don't want people to say, hey, I'm a Christian game designer and here's a Christian like game thing, because I'm like,
Yeah, I
that's
mean, when you said Christian game designer, I full body cringed because
right,
basically my first thought went to Christian rock
exactly,
and those sorts of styles of movements.
exactly, it's terrible.
Like yeah,
It's
yeah.
terrible.
I mean the issue with like Christian as an adjective
Mm-hmm.
is that then you're associated with other
Mm-hmm.
Christians.
Yeah, like, that's right. That's right. Exactly, which is why I don't like call myself a Christian game designer, right? Like, or like I call myself that gamer priest instead. That's like my way of like,
Exactly.
sort of.
Yeah. Mhm.
But
And I deal with a similar thing when it comes
mm,
to Israel.
mm,
I am staunchly anti-Zionist.
mm-hmm, right,
Like
mm-hmm,
I think Israel is an apartheid state. Like
right,
I don't like it. But a
yeah,
lot of people hear Jewish games and things and think Israel. So yeah,
mm,
you gotta be very clear about that sort of distinction there. Yeah.
mm-hmm, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So I don't know. I wonder, like, if someone were to design games that like really taught like that, or that taught like an ethic of sacrifice, right? Like a sacrificial love ethic, or like that like was like a game that was like about like um like I'm just trying to think of stuff that's actually related to the teaching of Jesus, like the idea of like turning the other cheek as like a core ethic to a game. Like I just wonder what a game would be like if it was designed that way. And I think you're right that like the problem with that is that it's so loaded. I think it would be really hard, just hard to do it. Now,
Yeah. The only person that I've ever seen be be able to pull off sort of overt Christian discussion sort of stuff um, is uh, somebody who I mentioned just earlier, Bad
yes,
Gum Sam.
that's who I was going to
Yeah.
bring up. Yeah,
Yep.
that's who I was
Yep.
about to bring up.
That,
Yeah,
that's
100%.
that's the only person.
Mm-hmm. I know, but there's so when I just read,
I'm sure there can be more people doing it. I
yeah,
just don't know about them.
yeah, I just read like all of his game like list descriptions, and like it is those games are nuts. Like I haven't gotten to play any of them, but the description of all of them like wrecked me just reading the descriptions. And I'm like,
Nice.
that's it. Like that's what I'm looking for. So someone has done it, right? Like it's like it exists. But again, that comes from like a marginalized perspective too, though, right?
Yep.
Like, and
Yep.
that I think is part of the rub that we're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, because the thing is like when you're talking about like training their cheek and things like that, right? Basically, what you're doing is you're talking about things that are structures of play that reinforce the hegemony. Like it's more interesting to get other perspectives.
Mm.
Like yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, this is This is that. Well, no, I don't know. It just is what it is. But I do find it. Well, I love that there is a vibrant like community of Jewish game designers in the
Me too.
TTRPG scene, designing indie games. Like I adore it. Like right now, that Esther game. I should have been prepped to talk about this. That
Oh
Esther
yeah,
game.
Max's game. Yeah,
Yes, is.
yeah. I did a little bit of consulting on that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, yeah. Games fucking bomb. I love it.
I only learned about it like last week, so like it's new, or like in the last week, so like I didn't know it was being well. There, like that's the problem with February, right? Being in Zine month is like there's just too many games for me to sort through, and I just
Yeah.
keep finding about all these games that I'm like, oh, these are perfect, Holy Happy Hour Batman games. But what's the full name of that game? Or I want to just pull it up to like say it and I can find it later and put it in the notes for this. Oh, there it is. Because I'm following on Kickstarter, so I found it. It's Esther and the Queens, a Purim themed
Yes.
Jewish tabletop role playing game. Yeah, I saw that and I was like, that game sounds amazing. Like that sounds so freaking good.
Yeah,
And
it's very neat.
yeah,
Mhm.
so stuff like that. Like I'm so
Have you seen their previous game, Hanukkah Goblins?
no.
Okay, so there's a very famous story called Herschel and the Hanukkah Goblins,
Okay.
which is an illustrated children's book about goblins and Hanukkah, and they sort of took that story and like wrote a sequel in game form, and it's very fun.
That sounds awesome.
You play a bunch of little goblins, and you try and do Hanukkah stuff.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I will have to find that. I'll have to see if I can find it. It's probably on itch, so I'll have to go down that
Yeah,
rabbit
Hanukkah
hole.
Goblins is on Edge for sure.
Yeah, I'll go down that rabbit hole when I'm not hosting the show. But I am going to link that Kickstarter, and I'll put it in the show notes for people who are watching this later, so they can find it. I think that link will work. I just put. I don't know because I just copied and pasted it from. I think it'll work for people. I don't know.
It should work.
But yeah, like I said, I'm glad that there is I'm glad that there is a vibrant and growing community of Jewish game designers. I think it's really cool to see it out there. And then part of that for me is just that, like, as a religious person, right? Like, I'm a religious person, right? Like, and I want people to experience religion as being a thing that we can talk about in games. Like, and it is. They are like, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not as if I'm not unaware that there's always religion in TTRPGs, but like the idea that you could have like non-fictional religious themes. Does that make sense?
Yes.
In our games, and like have people experience that as being like a thing that's like not something to avoid or like feel like, oh, is that going to be weird and oppressive to me? Like experience it like in a cool way and be like, oh, that's awesome. Like, I don't know. Something about that is just encouraging to me. And the more of it that exists, the more excited I am about it.
Yeah.
So.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's that rabbit hole. Let's see. What else we never talked about Gunfucks. I knew there was something I was forgetting about.
Oh yeah, sure. We can talk about Gunfucks, yeah.
But we're like close to time. I didn't know, I feel like, so right now Gunfucks is being played by One Shot, isn't it? Or just the second part came out?
Yeah.
Like this week?
Yeah. Tracy's running it for One Shot.
Right.
Because they're doing a whole mess of episodes. I'm going to be on some episodes actually after the Gunfucks one.
Oh, nice. What are you going to be playing?
I'm running some more Wanderhome because I ran some Wanderhome for them a bit ago, and I'm running a little bit more. Because there were a bunch of us who recorded episodes for them.
Right.
Since James is out with Spade.
Right. That's how I learned about the Punk's been dead since 1979 or whatever. Which I haven't gotten to play it yet, but as soon as but that's how I learned about it, and now I'm obsessed with getting a group to play it because like oh man, that game sounds so great. It's like it's like my perfect game premise. But anyway,
well, aside from the name, what do you like about Gunfucks?
Well, I haven't got to play it either. Like that's the thing.
Yeah.
But everyone's
Fair.
talking about it, and I love the vibe of it, and I love that it's sort of unabashedly like you have to be badass, and
Yeah.
like you like what's the right way to say this? Like I think that the idea of being like I guess because I'm a progressively minded person who in
Uh-huh.
my real life is like hesitant to be like, okay, I don't know how I don't know how I feel about guns. I don't know how I feel about violence and things like that. But then like in games and in some movies, I'm like, I want to be as badass as possible as I possibly can, and I
Yeah.
want to like have the craziest fucking weapons. And like, so I guess one of the things that's cool about the game, just as a surface level thing, is like the crazy guns. Like that's just
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just awesome from like just like a real like. There's nothing deep about that. It's
Mhm.
just cool as shit.
Yeah.
But the idea of like something about that, something about like being able to just like embrace what it is, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
I really
Yeah.
like it's what makes me want to play it and like be
It's
like
earnest.
what earnest. Yes, yeah, it's
Yeah.
earnest. It's earnest about stuff that like in my real life I have a weird relationship with. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
So
Yeah.
what was where did Gunfucks come from? Like what birthed that game for you?
So Spencer Campbell wrote the system that Complex is using.
Right, real quick,
Um,
because I have to. Spencer's a guest on the show next week, folks who are watching this. Make sure you come back next week and watch Spencer on
yeah,
the show. Sorry, go
yeah.
on. I had to interrupt with a commercial real
Spencer's
fast.
great. Spencer and I live like 15, 20 minutes from each other.
That's hilarious.
We have never seen each other in person.
That's even more hilarious. Okay.
Yeah, we met online at the start of the pandemic, and we have made loose plans to see each other multiple times and never done it.
That's such a fucking 2020 to
hilarious.
2022 story if I've ever heard one.
Yeah,
Jesus.
yeah. It's so Spencer made the Lumen system.
Yeah.
And I got an early peek at it. And I really like Spencer's system design. I think they're very loose and just easy to work with. I've written some custom playbooks for Spencer's game Slayers, which I played Slayers with Spencer on a podcast, and then I wrote 12 Slayers playbooks in a day. So I saw the Lumen system, and I was on vacation at the time, and people were talking about it and talking about various looter shooters and things. And I was like, hey, is anybody thinking about making a Borderlands game? This was in Spencer's Discord, the Gay RPG Discord. And people were like, go for it. So Borderlands won the touchstone, a couple other touchstones too. But that's the one that everyone mentions.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I wrote Gunfucks in 24 hours. I wrote it in 24 hours, then I laid it out. And yeah, because I just vomited it out. Yeah, and I've always found those sorts of video games incredibly interesting as far as like pieces of media, right? And I've basically only consumed them through watching friends play them.
Okay.
I have never finished a Borderlands game.
Okay.
I have played maybe 3 hours of Borderlands.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, that's about my experience with Borderlands. It's not a. It's not a series that I've spent much time in. Like I've messed with them. They're in like a large category of games that like, yeah, I've messed with that, but it's like not a game I've really played. Like,
yeah. And I think the world's very neat, and I hate Randy Pitchford, the guy who owns that company. I think he fucking sucks. He's a piece of shit. So it's fun to take things made by shitty people and make them better. Um, uh, so I was like, all right, I want a bunch of guns, weird guns, do stuff. I can put the word fuck in the title. It'll be fun.
It's fun.
A lot of people are hesitant to swear in rules text, and it's like, no, just do it. Like I write how I talk though. Which is not how a number of people write. Gunfucks has more of a academic voice in certain rules bits, just because I was being quick.
Okay, sure. Well, you said you wrote it in 24 hours, so.
Yeah. I mean, but that's not uncommon for me.
Right, that's what it sounds like. That if we had more time on the show than we do, that's another topic. I was like, earlier in this discussion, like an hour ago, I thought of digging into that because I'm curious about that. So I don't know if we can have you back on another time. That's what I dig into, which is like the process of writing a game. Like boom, just like now I've just spent the last 24 hours and I wrote the game. I find that very fascinating.
Yeah. I'm more than happy to come back on and talk about that with you. So I wrote Gunfucks and it was a lot of fun, and then had some family stuff happen, that delayed me from throwing it on itch, just because I had other shit I was thinking about. Then I threw it on itch as part of the Lux Collective. There were a bunch of us all making games using the Lumen system. Okay. We all released them at the start of the summer last year, and we like raised money and promoted each other and stuff like that. And that's how Gunfucks became what it is today. Yeah, and I raised a bunch of money for a update to it. Nice. So there's more Gunfucks coming.
Nice, that's awesome. Yeah, I see a lot of people talk about it. Like I've seen it talked about a lot lately, I feel like. So it makes you want to play it. It also could just be the circles that I interact with in social media, but I don't know. That's the case for everything. I see people talking.
I don't see people talking about it.
So okay, well there you go. Okay, fine, fair.
I don't generally see anyone discussing my art, so that's neat.
That's a whole nother topic, right? But anyway, it's like making art, throwing it into the void, having no idea if anyone ever interacts with it. But that's just.
Well, I mean, I make art for me, so there I make so many games that I do not show to anyone. I make a number of games that I've only showed to my therapist and my partners.
Well, so we will have to have you back on the show. There's so much more we could talk about because, like, honestly, like on all of those subjects we just said, plus even just talking, like I just want to go through more of your intimacy games at some point. And then that'll give me a lot more to talk about too, because I feel like there's just so like I'm one of the few people because I do a 2-player romance RPG with my wife, like we like there are a few people that have played as many of those in that genre as we have, and there's so many more now than there was when we started that show in 2018, and there's tons we haven't played. So like I feel like I'm just like it's the best time if people like 2 and 3 player games that are like about intimacy, about love and romance and sex. Like this is the time to be into those genres for RPGs because it's like it's the moment for that.
Yeah, my intimacy games run the gamut. There are some that are about romance, and there are some. I have a game called Robert's Rules of Orgy.
I see that. Yeah. I see it. Yeah. So I want to dig into those games, and we could talk more about that as sometime, and maybe I will be inspired to. We'll be inspired to start season 3 of Pot of Love, and then we can talk about that at some point.
Yeah, sure.
But anyway, all right. Thank you for coming on the show, dear. I really appreciate you coming on Holy Happy Hour. It's my pleasure. I'm gonna have Adira wait in my digital green space, aka the same Zoom call where she won't go anywhere, but for you all, she will. So I can say goodbye to you. Yes, exactly. Thank you again. And so we're gonna. There we go. So huge thanks, Adira, for coming on the show. I've been waiting for this, and it was a huge delight. And so I'm very grateful. And I'm very grateful for all you watching the show, whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching this later on YouTube or on allportsopen.com. I appreciate you being here watching the conversation. If you are watching us live, it would be great if you hit the follow button on Twitch so that you can get updates whenever we go live with new guests. Like next week, we have Spencer Campbell on the show, and you can make sure you don't miss that. Consider subscribing as well to the show. It helps support what we do here at Holy Happy Hour Batman. And it goes a long way just to, support deep conversations, which sometimes they're deep, sometimes they're not so deep, about TTRPGs, but in joking aside, like the intersection with spirituality and philosophy, psychology, religion, all the things we love to talk about on Holy Happy Hour Batman. If you like that, if it's something you want to support, there's just some ways that you can do that. If you only caught part of tonight's show, you can always head to allportsopen.com. That's allportsopen.com. Watch every episode of the show afterward, or you can find Holy Happy Hour Batman on YouTube. The order of the episodes on YouTube is weird and wonky if you care about that, because we kind of migrated all of the episodes from the All Ports Open Network YouTube channel, which doesn't really exist anymore. And now Holy Happy Hour just has its own YouTube channel. So subscribe there. Go back and watch great episodes. Like if you like this conversation tonight, you might want to check out the episode with Alex Roberts, for example. Fabulous episode. Go back and check that one out. Or, any of the other great episodes of the show we've had. You can check them all out there on the YouTube channel. Head over there, subscribe. It would be also a huge way to support the show. We have great shows on our network. We'd love for you to check them out. You can see them at allportsopen.com, including our schedule. Huge thanks to Joshua Wise, my APON co-founder, for the artwork on the stream, everything he does for our network. Thanks to Dr. Octorock for the use of his music on the show. Like I said, I'm that gamer priest, Ben. You can come back next week. We'd love to have you with Spencer Campbell joining the show. It's going to be another great episode. I'm really excited about it. That'll be same time, same bat channel next week, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific time here at That Gamer Priest on Twitch. So, all right, my friends, enjoy the holiest and happiest of hours. Don't go anywhere, because I'm going to migrate you over. I'm going to raid you over to the worst days from Apon Games and allportsopen.com. Don't forget to follow March Masks. It starts tomorrow. Vote at marchmasks.com. I have a PC in there named Catalyst. You can vote for me. It's like later. It's like not right away. It's like a ways away into the competition. But it's a great character. You're going to want to March Masks. Don't forget about it. Anyway, stick around. I'll air an ad for Delinquent Comics real quick here, and then I'll raid everyone over into the other show. So have a good night.
Calling all citizens of Halcyon City. The newest generation of heroes are now painting the pages of Delinquent Comics, a Masks new generation actual play podcast. Complete back issues are available now on allportsopen.com, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever podcasts are found. You can help join the fight and hear the newest releases early by becoming a supporter on Patreon at patreon.com/allportsopen. New bi-weekly episodes become available to all citizens on May 24th, featuring the newest arc, The Sunset Island Saga.